All right, before we start centering, I just wanted to talk quickly about the bat that I'm using. This is called a hydro bat, and it is made out of plaster, and it fits over the pins into these little rubber fittings. Folks, if you are using plastic or wooden bats, that's perfectly fine. But I prefer plaster because I don't have to run the wire tool under my pot after it's completed, because the plaster absorbs a little bit of moisture from the bottom of the pot and eventually it just pops off. So I can skip that whole step with the wire cutter that can sometimes cause problems. But again, use the bat of your choice. This might look a little strange if you're using a different one, but it's just a bat made out of a different material. Okay, so to get started centering, I've got my 1 pound of clay measured and wedged. And I'm just gonna wet down the area of the bat where the clay is gonna go and put a little bit of water on the bottom, flatten it out. If you're working with a clay that's highly saturated, you can use less water on that step, or vice versa. If it's dry, you can use more. Just add however much you need to get it to stick to the bat. So here I'm gonna give it a couple firm smacks with the flat part of my hand. Don't do this with your fist or with your fingers open, because then you get dents. You want to use the flat part of your hand to kind of compress that down and get it nice and stuck to the bat. So next, I'm going to get my hands wet and get my sponge about 50% saturated. So we don't want this dripping, but I'm going to hold it in my hand while I'm centering, and it'll have enough water that I can squeeze and get a little more out of it if I need more moisture. Now, just as a side note here, sometimes when you're beginning, it's hard to focus on centering and have the sponge in your hand. So I'll show you how I do it, and then I'll show you the hand position without the sponge if you are just learning to center and this just creates more of a struggle for you, okay? So I'm a right-handed person, so I'm gonna have my right fist on the top and my left hand on the side. My wheel is going counterclockwise. Now, if you are a lefty, just flip your wheel to go the other way and switch over to this side, okay, to 4 o'clock. I'm gonna be at 8 o'clock for this step. So I'm gonna put my right fist on top, because as I push in from the side to center, it's gonna kind of move up. So the right hand is there on top just to kind of keep it down and flattened on the top, okay? And then my left hand is gonna come in from the side and push to center. And that's pretty much like 90% of the way there, y'all, but I just want to explain a little bit more what I was doing there. And I'm gonna get this off center too so you guys can see. So this is centered. Bam! This would be not centered. It's much easier to explain when you can see it, because it's like, well, what is center? It just means it's in the center. But this is a visual illustration of the difference between center and now this is off center. Okay, so let me break this down a little bit. I told you what I'm doing with my right fist, but your left hand, or if you're a left-handed person, you'd be doing this with your right. Your left is the one where you're really getting all of your strength and pushing the clay towards the center to get it where you want it to be. So when I do this, I kind of lean and I use the weight of my body instead of trying to just rely on hand strength to push it into the middle. So I'm leaning almost over my clay right now. And that helps me not to strain my hands and wrists so much. If I can just get my palm nice and flat and kind of lean, then it's pretty easy to get enough pressure to push it into center. All right, now let me show you without the sponge. If you're not wanting to fiddle with the sponge, that's okay. A spray bottle comes in handy here because you can get a nice coating of moisture on it. So that's kind of in place of what the sponge would be doing. I'm gonna push this off center again. And it's the same hand placement even without the sponge. The fist is still there just to keep it from shooting up and coning up. And you're just gonna lean on the left. So y'all, the way that I was originally taught to center was just with a left hand here to do all the work. I guess maybe that's kind of a traditional technique of centering, but it just presents so many challenges, and it's not using the body to its full capacity to get the clay where you want it to be quickly, all right? So if you've learned other techniques and they're working for you, that's completely fine. But in my years of working and teaching, I've just found this to be kind of a simple solution to the difficulty that centering can present, all right? So now just to clean it up a little bit, I always, I don't know if it's because of the way my hands are or what, but I always get a little off-centeredness like right here at the bottom. So I can easily fix that though, just by putting a little pressure there with my sponge. Because I don't need to recenter the whole thing. I just have like a problem area. And usually, you guys, or usually y'all, the solution to a little off-center problem area is just to give it a little pressure. With your finger, with the sponge, whatever. Just kind of push it towards center. And then you can just kind of clean it up a little bit. So I am centering this piece of clay just to make a cylinder. And something important about centering that we aren't taught often enough, I think, is I want to center this so that it's already going into the shape that I want. So I kind of have like a hockey puck, and that's going to be pretty easy to then, coax into a cylinder. If I were making a bowl, I would center it lower and wider. If I were making a tall vase, I would center it higher and thinner. So I can show you that right now. If I was making a vase, a tall, narrow piece, I would center it more like this. So always keep in mind what you're going to be asking of the clay every step of the way. Even the shape and direction in which you center is going to give you an advantage to making the piece that you actually want to make. Okay? And also being in control and intentional about what you're doing is important as well. So that's centering. If you have any questions, comments, any feedback at all, go ahead and drop it in the comments. And I hope that this technique helped you out a little bit today. All right, join us for video 2 if you'd like to see how to open the pot and pull the walls.